You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Family Lawyer podcast. Today I'm chatting with Victoria Cannon. Victoria is Head of Family at Hugh James Solicitors, and the topic of conversation today, not necessarily specifically family, but more the culture of law, the business of law, and Victoria's own experiences, both in terms of coming into the law, as she has quite an unusual route to the profession, and also her experiences of running her own law firm as well. So thank you very much indeed for joining the podcast, Victoria.
Oh, thank you, David, for inviting me.
First question, very straightforward. I've done a very short introduction, but please, would you mind telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, certainly. So, as you know, my name is Victoria. I head up family law at Hugh James. Hugh James is a top 100 law firm, and our headquarters is in Cardiff, but we also have offices in London, Plymouth, Southampton, and Manchester. I've got autonomy to take family law where I need to take family law, and it's a great opportunity to build a department. So something I'm looking forward to now going forward.
Fantastic. And I said that you had quite an unusual route into the law. Tell us about that as well, because it wasn't your first career.
No, my first career was in the Inland Revenue, or HMRC, as you would call it now. And that spans 17 years, David. But whilst I was there, they were very keen to progress the people working there with things like development and education. So firstly, I went back to do an A-level in law. And HMRC paid for that, and I really enjoyed it. And from there, I went on to study for a degree. And again, I was lucky enough to have that paid for. Only at that point did I think, well, actually, I wouldn't mind taking this up as a career. Then I said, okay, well, I'll start the LPC. Well, again, they paid for that. So I was really, really lucky because I know how expensive that can be. But then, of course, there's no internal progression in order to take up a spot with the government to be a lawyer. So it was then really a case of, okay, well, I'm sat here with qualifications to be a lawyer. I really need to move on. At that point, I had gone to another government department called Estyn. They regulate education in Wales. And I had quite a senior post. So when I decided to take a training contract, I had to halve my salary. But it was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional. I thought this is a worthwhile career. I was sat there in an admin job, really, working for professionals within the revenue and within Estyn. And I thought, okay, I would like to be a professional myself. So it's worth taking the plunge. But it was a very, very strange route. And the reason why is because I didn't start a training contract till I was 34 years of age.
Well, that is an unusual route. I grant you that. And then you took the plunge and set up your own firm as well.
Yes, yeah.
Two questions really. One, why family? What was the attraction of family law to you? And then secondly, what really precipitated the decision to launch your own firm?
Certainly, yeah. When I had the training contract, I applied to, it was a medium-sized firm in Cardiff, and I think they were looking for somebody a little more mature for a training contract. So really, I was quite lucky to fall into that slot. So I think I would say the family probably chose me, because when I went in there, really, my full training seat, as it were, I did some commercial property, but in the main, I had a family seat. So I think family chose me, and really, it was a natural progression. I mean, I love family law. I think you have to be part counsellor, probably, to practice within family. And it comes to me quite naturally because I'm a people person. So that was the reason why. In terms then of why I set up my own firm. So after I did my training contract, I stayed with the firm, I think it was for a couple of months. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to cut my teeth because They wouldn't give me high quality work, understandably, because I was newly qualified. So I thought, okay, so I'll take a plunge. I went into a high street firm and took over a full caseload from an existing renowned practitioner. So talk about throwing yourself in the deep end, David. I certainly did that. So I was dealing with everything from care to ancillary relief to private children matters, divorce finances, inheritance issues. But really, it was learning on the job. And I didn't have many people that I could go to. So I formed relationships with counsel, barristers, other colleagues in family law in order to really pave my way and find out, how to practice. So it was a really good experience. So after that, I sort of thought, okay, so I'm at a point that I'm a little bit older. Where do I want this to take me, this career to take me? So I thought with a colleague, right, we'll try to set up a practice. So I went into law, into a law practice with £6,000 in my pocket and 4 clients. And we set up a practice in a little place called Pontyclun, which is a fantastic place in South Wales. And the first month or so, we were just waiting for the phone to ring. But it did. And we actually engaged in a lot of marketing activity, business development activity. We sewed ourselves into the fabric of the community and engaged with other business owners. And then it started to take off. So it was a massive risk, but it was a risk worth taking, because I don't think I would be the lawyer that I am today if I didn't.
I think there are probably a lot of people listening who might wish that they could take that plunge. I mean, would you consider that it was easier, in inverted commas, when you were doing it than it is now? Particularly if you think about things like your insurance premiums,
Yeah.
your regulatory requirements, your compliance requirements, that kind of thing.
I can't tell you that it was easy. And as I say, we had to take into account things like insurance. So we'd be paying it on a monthly basis. So it was a massive risk. Would I do it again? Probably not, David. But I, I think at the time I was early 40s and I just thought, you know what, let's give it a go. If you want to try something, let's give it a go. But in terms of regulation, in terms of insurance, in terms of knowing that you're actually on the right path, it was a struggle and it took a lot of time and effort to try to work that through. But as I say, I think it was worth it. We built a successful business over 12 years. I've worked with some fantastic lawyers. I've had the opportunity to develop trainee lawyers who have now gone on into excellent posts. So for me, it was very worthwhile. It set me up for where I want to be today.
You've said you've put a huge amount of effort into it, and I mean, look,
Yeah.
anybody who runs a business will tell you that it's it takes that time and effort.
Yeah.
What were the challenges that you found in particular during that time?
Getting work. I think that was the greatest challenge. At the start, we didn't have a legal aid contract because, as you know, you can only tender at certain times. But we were really working from the South Wales valleys and the surrounding areas, and we were just sort of touching on Cardiff. So the work really in that area would have lended itself to legal aid. So we needed to be quite inventive and we needed to be quite progressive in going out and getting work. So we tried to make links with other business women. I set up my own network. It was called the Ladies Business Alliance. So it was like like-minded women in the community, accountants, IFAs, really any sort of business that was in the locality would join, and it was non-profit. But what that did is it actually widened my network. So through that, I met other people and they would refer. So that was I think when you're in business, you need to think outside the box. And you'll know this, David, you can't just sit there and rest on your laurels. You've got to make things work for you. And it's about
Mm.
meeting people. And it's about, putting something out there. It's trial and error in terms of marketing. I mean, I can remember some of the things we did, such as we were contacted by marketing firms to put adverts in hospitals. And they didn't really work because they didn't give you the coverage, but you paid through the nose for doing it. So it's very much trial and error. And if you ask me now, I can tell you what works, But I had to go through that for 12 years to make sure that we were on the right path. But I'm proud of that achievement. And we were nominated for a LexisNexis Family Law Award in 2020, and that really was a pinnacle of my career. We also won several business awards right at the start of the business, and we were also nominated and shortlisted actually for a Law Society Excellence Award. So, it worked well. The difficulty with being in business, as your listeners will know, is you're always switched on, right?
Mhm.
You're never switched off. Say I took a holiday, I would always be by the phone. So you are constantly looking for work. You're constantly looking for opportunities. In terms of staff, I had some brilliant staff working with me over the years. The difficulty being, though, however, that you expect them to work like you, and understandably they can't, or they shouldn't, um, because they don't own the business. That was a challenge for me, and you get let down, and there's a lot of tears a lot of times, but that's what running a business takes. But I think it makes you a fantastic lawyer in terms of your business development skills. So instead of just doing the job and being on the tools, you're actually able to bring work in and to accept and look for opportunities. And as I said, think outside the box.
We're chatting at a point in time where I spot quite a number of firms have re-elected their managing partners. Certainly, I've seen quite a bit on social media about it. There seems to be a drive towards improving the level of business acumen and management in law firms. Is that something that you recognize and something that you
Yes.
see that was traditionally quite weak?
It is, but I think you need to go back to basics. You need to look at your trainees. In Hugh James, the trainees, they start the program and it's not just about the law. And it's not just about learning the law, it's about learning business development, learning how to manage, learning things like accounts, looking out for risk and compliance. So I think it needs to start at that sort of level. And then these will be the managing partners of the future. I think in the past that's been quite weak, but I think now there's an eye opener to say that you start with junior lawyers and you build from there. So yes, I think I'd agree with that.
How much did government and regulatory change impact the firm? You ran it for 12 years
Yeah.
during the time when legal aid starts to get cut and certainly
Mm.
tightens up, around the time of the Legal Services Act as well, and
Mhm. Mhm.
so-called Tesco law.
Mhm.
I mean, did you feel that bite?
Yes, absolutely. We took on a legal aid contract, and there was one lady working with me in particular at the time. And this was the reason why we really went for a legal aid contract, because she wished to do some guardian work and some public law work. So we had a fully blown legal aid contract, but the regulation that came with that and the necessity for there to be domestic abuse for eligibility places more pressure on firms to consider where your work is coming from, to ensure that if you join up with fantastic organisations for domestic abuse, you've got to ensure that there's transparency in those relationships. You've got to make sure that your record keeping is absolutely particular and there are no gaps. So to work with a legal aid contract post 2012 has been quite difficult. And I sold my business, or I merged my business in 2022, David, and it is only this year that I'm finishing up dealing with legal aid matters to put them to bed, because it's difficult, and I can understand why practitioners don't offer legal aid anymore because of the red tape that comes with it. It's a nightmare. It is absolutely a maze.
Mergers and acquisition activity in the law is quite active at the moment. I think it's fair to say there is a lot of activity around there. And you talk about the fact that you did it in 2022. What started you to think about the fact that you might need an exit strategy as a business?
A couple of things, really. Firstly, it's really difficult to recruit good family lawyers. And the reason for that is understandably, they're more likely to choose a larger firm with benefits. clear progression paths. I mean, when you're running a small firm and you're asking a family lawyer to come in, you're really a jack of all trades. And that takes a certain type of lawyer to fit in with that. Plus the fact that you can't offer the salaries that potentially bigger firms can. So I think that was a realization. And look, when legal aid changed, I think there was quite a gap in new family lawyers coming through the ranks, as it were. The pot of family lawyers diminished quite a bit. And that was one of the determining events for me. And the other one was really, I was getting to an age in lockdown and I thought, do you really want to do this when you're 70? No. I would rather work for somebody, and still have some drive, some enthusiasm, some business acumen to bring to a role outside of the business. So really to be still quite active and not past my prime, if you like. So when I got to lockdown, and at that time, look, I turned 50 and I'm not ashamed to say that. I think I thought to myself, look, if an opportunity comes up, I think I need to take it if it's the right opportunity and it takes my staff somewhere where they have got opportunities and they've got good working practices, because that was important to me as well. So an opportunity came up. It was a top 70 law firm, and yeah, I jumped at the chance, David, and I thought that would be right, and some of my staff are still there.
So for anybody listening, and I don't want you necessarily to go into all the detail and
Yeah.
obviously stuff that you can't tell me, but for anybody listening that's perhaps in this kind of position and is thinking about it, what kind of practical steps did you take to prepare the business for sale and then to start looking for potential opportunities?
Okay. So to prepare the business for sale, I mean, I was really lucky with my firm because we didn't have any skeletons in the closet. We didn't have any claims. Yes, over the years we had complaints, but they were seen through properly. So I didn't have any concerns about merging with another business. So it's really, if you're looking to do that, I think is try to get your financial hygiene right, try to look at any difficulties, address them. So really you become a proposal that is attractive to another firm. In terms then of looking for opportunities, I can remember that there was this guy that contacted me, and I think he just tried to sell you through his website and things like that. That really didn't work for us, and it's, you can pay out money, good money, for things like that, and be careful, because I just don't think things like that work. The best thing that you can do really is talk to recruiters, because recruiters have their ear to the ground. All right. And if you've had good relationships with recruiters over the years, and we did, because obviously we're asking them to try to fill vacancies, speak to them in confidence and say, look, these are my plans. Can you check the market, see if there's anything out there? I actually can present quite a clean firm. I'm realistic on cost, and they will do the legwork and look for you. And then, when you do come to the point that you're trying to merge with somebody else, you've got to go through due diligence, which can be difficult, because really they're delving into every single corner of your firm, but you would expect them to, David,
Yeah.
and you've got to show things like your complaints records, what you've done with the legal ombudsman, where your work has come from, show financial accounts, etc. But it's doable, so just dig in and do it. The rewards will be worthwhile, because at the end of the day, look, what's the biggest benefit that I had, and the biggest concern for me, was runoff cover with my insurers. Once we merged, obviously that was taken away. So that difficulty or that liability was taken away, and then you can work towards freedom. I think, take from today, the running a firm is fantastic, but when perhaps you get to a point, and I think that if I did it again, I was probably trying to say smaller, and it may just be me and one other, and not try to expand too quickly or take on too much, when in reality that is really difficult to manage. Another thing that I think is worth saying at this point is, if you are thinking of, or you have started a firm, I think I might have looked for some financial backing. I think that would have been helpful as well, to take the firm to another stage, or another level, because without that, it's difficult to take your firm from, say, a smallish firm to, say, a medium-sized firm, or to get in, some other sort of partners and things. So, yeah, it's difficult, David. But as I said to you at the beginning, it was a good venture, and I would certainly do it again.
There is a rise in external investment in law firms. You're starting to see certainly the VC sector become very interested in law, which is interesting. Before we move to a close on the podcast, it's really interesting to kind of talk through some of your experience, Victoria. So thank you. Talk to me a little bit about the changing culture of the law firm as well, because for me, and I'm an outsider, I'm not a lawyer. Obviously, I'm running a news publication, but for me, I see a very different type of business, very different type of entity now than even pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's right. When I trained, there was a culture that it was, you finish your work before you go home. You don't go home until your principal goes home. It could be the case of a trainee solicitor done things outside of a law practice. So it could be that you're going to pick up dry cleaning or something like that. But it happens, David, and that was certainly the case when I was training. So it was a real difficult training contract, but I wouldn't be the lawyer that I am now if I didn't have those challenges. Post pandemic, I think there is a lot of change in terms of taking into account your mental health. I think hybrid working is a good thing because I think it allows you to cut out the commute. It certainly allows you to recharge sort of midweek if you're working from home. But the biggest thing that I think has come about, and I think this is actually that's something that needs to be in place, is trust. You need to trust your team. And if they're working from home, it doesn't mean, that they're doing things that you don't expect them to do. If they're meeting their targets, trust your team. And I think you need to instill that in trainees from a young age, of more junior lawyers, to say, okay, you have that trust. Only if it becomes an issue when you're not meeting targets will I pick you up and we'll have to look at something else and be more rigid. So for me, it's about trust. But I do think that the overall setup of firms have changed, albeit I think we all have heard recently about poor lady in London, Vanessa Heap, which touched me quite deeply in terms of what she went through and what happened to her. But hopefully we're on a change for something better. Mental health is much more prevalent in how we deal with our colleagues, and we take things into account. And obviously, things like if somebody needs time out, I think they should have time out, because after all, this is a stressful job. And I think support needs to be there as well. So any principal or any partner in a firm really should look out for support and look out for signs that perhaps members of your team are struggling as well, which I don't think in the past was really there, David. I think it was more about getting the job done. So it's much more people orientated, much more looking at mental health, much more offering support than it was when I trained.
And for me, and I go back to your point about recruitment as an example, and you finding it quite difficult as a smaller firm to recruit. We're a small business, and the arrow in my armory is the ability to provide flexibility for people as in a small business is really, really key.
Yeah.
Do you see that larger businesses are sort of now really picking up on that then, and sort of blunting that arrow, if you like?
Yes, I do. So I can give you an example in my team. So we're a very large organization, but the partners within the firm have said, right, Victoria, you take your team and use complete autonomy, do what you need to with your department. So I have that flexibility to offer to my team. And I think that's essential. Because if they say to me, right, I'm going to the doctors, or like you say, I'm going to see a school play, so be it. If you need to work into the evening or wherever to complete your tasks, I'm fine with that. You really manage your own caseload. And as I said to you, David, as long as the targets are there and you're meeting your clients' needs, I have no difficulty with that. I think we all need to change and to adapt, because I don't think that the younger generation are at a place where they will accept the rigidity that was in existence in law firms, say pre-pandemic, and certainly when I trained in the 2000s.
That's really interesting. I mean, certainly, you see the successful law firms in inverted commas, and they espouse this flexible working. They are very careful in their outward perception, I suppose, and how they're recruiting. Interesting, though, I'm not completely convinced that Magic Circle and London law firms are going quite down that route. They still seem to retain that rigidity.
I think you're right, but I think in time that will probably trickle into those firms as well. I can't see that it wouldn't, because as I said to you, I mean, I think most people who listen to your podcast will be touched by the Vanessa Heap situation. I certainly was, and I think this is starting to open up a discussion about mental health, and about how you have to take into account flexibility in the workplace and to understand your staff. Yes, we all want to meet goals. Yes, we all wish to meet targets and to make a success of our firms. But I think that you're going to fall on a sticky wicket if you don't take into account how your staff are feeling, how they're working, and how they're managing on a daily basis.
We're at pretty much the end of the discussion, but I have one final question for you. If you were launching a firm again today, if you were back at that point in time where you thought this was worth the investment and effort, what lessons do you think you'd take from your experience in the law into that new firm?
I think you need to probably start with a different viewpoint. I think I would stay small. I think that's the answer, really. Don't try to build too quickly. Stay small, look at the assets that you've got, rely upon yourself. You are your own boss, and I think there's advantages in that. But trying to build too quickly, you may find difficulty with that, because, as I say, our greatest issue was recruitment and good staff. And take, pat yourself on the back for doing it. It's worthwhile. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be big to succeed. I think, you can offer a quality service and you can be a fantastic practitioner, even if you're a one-man band.
I suspect if you spoke to most law firms, they would tell you that recruitment is their number one issue, is their biggest issue. And
Yeah.
I particularly feel quite strongly that the law has to continue to innovate, it has to continue to move, it has to continue to take account of the mental health and well-being of staff. We run publications across residential property, wills and probate, and family law, and each of those disciplines has a different level of stress. It has a different type of stress, but they're all very, very stressful roles. And in particular, in the family and wills and probate side of things, I think about the emotional toll that dealing with the kinds of issues that you deal with on a regular basis takes on people. So it's a really interesting topic. And as you say, I think we've turned a corner in the legal sector, and we really seem to be putting that at the forefront of our businesses. It's been brilliant to have you on the podcast, and really interesting to hear about your experiences and how that shaped your lawyer life as well. So thanks very much indeed, Victoria.
No, thank you very much for inviting me, David. It's been a pleasure.
The Today's Family Lawyer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on today'sfamilylawyer.co.uk. My thanks to Victoria. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at today'sfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.